Recently, you watched a video produced by CAST that explains the concept of universal design and universal design for learning. While the video explains UDL as a concept, we should still discuss specific ways that we can design using UDL for the subject matter that we teach. But first, let's acknowledge some of the connections between UDL and the concept of differentiated classrooms. In our differentiation module, we learned that a differentiated classroom provides multiple ways to provide the content of our instruction, multiple ways for students to engage in the learning process, and multiple ways to create learning products. If you look at CAST's UDL guidelines, we see those same elements. When designing instruction from a UDL framework, we provide multiple ways for students to engage with concepts. That's how we demonstrate the why of learning. We also represent information in multiple ways. That communicates the what of learning. And then we provide students multiple ways to act on that information or express their knowledge of it. This, in CAST's perspective, is the how of learning. You might have already noticed that there's much overlap between these categories. For instance, we need to represent information in order for students to engage with it. So if students are marking significant locations on a map, then they are engaging with the information that we have represented to them, and they're also expressing their knowledge with their marks on the map. If you find that your lessons indicate that overlap, then you might be using UDL in the right way. In the CAST video, we learned some examples of how to use UDL so that we provide those multiple layers simultaneously. For instance, if we use closed captions in videos, then we are simultaneously providing information in audio and video format. If we use solid, bold, and dotted lines on a graph that also uses color, then we're presenting information via color and texture simultaneously. Finally, if we allow students to read aloud a paper that they've written, they're demonstrating their knowledge while simultaneously appealing to two senses. But UDL involves more than that, and many students ask questions about how to communicate their UDL choices on their lesson plans. Students also wonder how they can employ UDL within their own disciplines. So let's take a look at some examples. For every subject that we discuss in this video, please notice that there is much overlap between the categories, and also please recognize that these are just some examples for employing universal design for learning, but they are not the only examples. Let's look at an English language arts classroom first. If I am teaching a work of literature, I could give my students several ways to read that literature. For instance, they could read a print copy of it, or they could read an electronic copy of it. And the electronic copy of it might be a little bit more interactive for them. Students could listen to a work of literature in audio format, and then as a supplementary form of representation, they could watch a film adaptation of some works of literature. I do want to note that I would not want students to watch a film in place of reading a work of literature, but it might be a nice supplement to the reading. As students are reading, though, they are also engaging with the subject matter, so overlap has already occurred. Students can further engage with the literature as they make meaning of it, and they can do that by organizing the literary devices in graphic organizers, or they can engage in book groups or small group discussions. They can listen to podcasts or audio reviews of the literature, and then to demonstrate their analyses of that work of literature, they could compose and conduct online or face-to-face presentations about it. They could write or recite analytical essays. They could also create sketch notes or charts to represent the motifs, structures, or themes of that literature. So by providing all these different opportunities to engage and express, students students are using multiple senses and they're exercising various levels of critical thinking. Similar strategies can take place in a mathematics classroom. Students might read about mathematical problems or concepts in their textbooks, but teachers might also present information in an interactive lecture. In addition, the teacher might use videos, such as the Khan Academy videos, to communicate the same information. As students are receiving that information, they're engaging with it to some extent, but they can further engage with it as they practice problem-solving skills using technological apps or working with partners in small groups and orally explaining to the class their problem-solving processes. This engagement, though, also enables them to express their knowledge. Still, other ways to demonstrate their skills would be to teach other classmates how to solve a problem, or to video themselves solving a problem and orally explaining each step. Students could simply do the math on a sheet of paper. The important idea to remember is that as teachers, we're not choosing just one opportunity from each list. We should select multiple opportunities, if not all opportunities, for students to engage with concepts and demonstrate their knowledge of them. And those multiple opportunities should also engage multiple senses and foster critical thinking at multiple levels. Here are some examples from a science classroom. As in the mathematics classroom, students could read information in their textbooks or packets. In addition to that, the teacher could explain the same concepts in an interactive lecture while also using diagrams, symbols, or charts to illustrate that information. To practice their skills or engage their thinking, students could answer questions either orally or in writing, either individually or in small groups. Students could participate in video simulations, or students could engage with learning apps. As they do so, they develop skills that would enable them to conduct experiments in the laboratory or draw diagrams, graphs, or charts to illustrate those concepts. Completing worksheets or graphic organizers are other ways they can demonstrate their knowledge. By offering all three opportunities, students are showing their knowledge manually and verbally. Finally, in a social science classroom, UDL can emerge in different ways. When I created this table, I was thinking of a history class, but similar concepts could work in a geography or in a political science class as well. Teachers could present information via books or lectures. They could use maps or illustrations to support that information. In addition, information could be revealed through dramatization so that students receive information in visual and auditory ways. Teachers can provide opportunities for student engagement by way of partner work or small group work as students answer questions. Students could also mark or make notes on maps to demonstrate their knowledge. Visiting museums, either physically or virtually, is another way to enable students to engage with events or trends in history. For a modern history class, students might engage with actual people by interviewing those who experienced significant events. Teachers might also have students listen to recorded interviews. To demonstrate their knowledge, students could use multisensory approaches. They could compose and conduct presentations about historical moments, or they could create and annotate maps or charts. They could even take a three-dimensional approach and create dioramas or other models to represent their understanding. Or they could take the traditional route and write an essay or report. Again, these concepts aren't really new to the learning environment, but in order for UDL to be apparent, teachers need to provide multiple ways for students to learn and express, not just one way. Now that we've looked at some specific examples of materials and activities that foster a UDL approach to learning, let's examine how to document those decisions when we write our lesson plans. On this slide, I've inserted an excerpt of procedures from a lesson plan on the Electoral College. On the left are the steps of the lesson itself. On the right, you'll see my notes about how differentiation takes place. Some of those notes specify UDL choices. For instance, at the beginning of this lesson, the teacher shows a video about how the Electoral College works. And the procedure itself is the line, the teacher will turn on the captions while the videos play. And then to the right, aligned with that procedure, is a note that designates that choice as UDL. Closed captioning presents content in audio and visual form. Notice the procedure at the bottom where students use their Chromebooks to review the video and then create sketch notes of those concepts. In the right column, aligned with that procedure, is the note that this activity employs UDL and that students will express their knowledge visually via the sketch notes, but also orally as they explain their sketch notes to the class. This procedure includes other differentiation opportunities as well. For instance, in the middle of the lesson, as students engage in small group work, the class has differentiated as it transitions from whole group learning to small group learning. Differentiation also takes place as the activities elevate the students' level of critical thinking. Notice how in this plan, each differentiation note is aligned visually with the procedure it describes. This kind of visual alignment makes it very easy for an evaluator to see how and where you have planned for differentiation in your instruction. Near the end of the lesson plan template, you also have a UDL table. This table is itself a demonstration of UDL in that it is a multifaceted way for you to demonstrate the differentiation in your classroom. This table includes the 3 dimensions of universal design for learning: multiple forms of engagement, representation, and expression. But the table has 2 additional columns that examine the cultural considerations of the lesson and the metacognition evident in the lesson. We'll get to those in a minute, but first let's look at the 3 columns on the left. On your plan, you will check off the options on the lists for representation, engagement, and expression. If you've checked off multiple options in each column, that's a good sign that you're using UDL. For instance, in a chemistry class, if you have students watch a video clip about the structure of an atom, which includes illustrations, you might also show them some 3-dimensional models of those atoms. If students read about certain chemical reactions, for instance, you might demonstrate those chemical reactions in class or show them a video of those chemical reactions. On the right side of the table, the cultural considerations and metacognition are related to those other 3 aspects of UDL. Cultural considerations are related to the engagement aspect of UDL. Remember that engagement has to do with the why of learning, so cultural considerations are ways to help students grasp the importance of concepts or the relevance of those concepts to their lives. The first option, nature of content, is often difficult for teacher candidates to understand, but for some topics, the nature of the subject matter just lends itself to cultural considerations. For example, in a history class, a lesson on the Trail of Tears includes information and engagement with the conflicts between cultures and the results of those conflicts. In a literature class studying the novel Things Fall Apart, students wouldn't understand the significance of the story if they didn't also learn about the culture of Nigeria before it was colonized by Europeans. Universal Design for Learning also encourages teachers to foster metacognition in their lessons. We've learned in other modules that metacognition refers to students thinking about their own thinking or evaluating their own thinking and learning. When students demonstrate their metacognition, they're acting on or expressing their knowledge at high levels of critical thinking. So if you can include students' metacognitive work in a lesson, then you can document that on this table to mark the evidence showing that. Are students engaging in peer review? Are they critiquing the answers of each other's solutions to problems? Are they making predictions based on the evidence they've gathered? If so, check off the appropriate selections in this column of the table. Demonstrating UDL is not difficult, but it can be complex, and it takes metacognition on our own part. These tables and columns on our lesson plan template can help guide our instructional design, but if you feel unsure about how you're differentiating and if you need more information or guidance with UDL, don't hesitate to check with your clinical supervisor or with your professor.